Today we're going to be talking about Strong Harbour Strings and your role at Strong Harbour Strings. So here we go. Let's start with why music? What was your first memory of playing music or listening to music?
Ah, what a fabulous question. My personal experience, the first music memories that I have. So I come from a very large musical family. I'm second youngest of five siblings, and my mother is a pianist and a piano teacher. And so I grew up just surrounded by music. So my earliest memories are of music, quite honestly, just playing with my brothers and sisters or going to music camps, playing with my siblings at home, hearing mom play the piano. Um, my mom's also a church musician and my dad's a pastor, so we grew up in like with church music all over, like through childhood all the time. So I can't pin an earliest memory per se, but I know that music was such an important part of my household growing up from from day one.
Wow. So
Yeah.
how has being surrounded by music from such a young age impacted you today?
Oh, hugely. Being surrounded by it's made it just part of what my life is. I mean, yes, I've become a professional musician, but I truly believe that even if I had gone down a different path, I would still have music in my life in some capacity. It's become a pillar of everything that I do, really. It's created it's connected to everything, right? It's like, yeah, and it's very important.
Yeah, wow. So can you talk a little bit about your journey to becoming a professional musician? So start at like day one.
Day one. Oh, okay, so becoming a professional musician. That is a very good question. Um, let's see. So day one in the life of becoming a professional musician starts very young. Unfortunately, it's a very interesting career field to be in because a lot of the times with music, it's not something you can just go to a training program in and then do it. Oftentimes, you have to have this lifelong experience, or at least multiple years in background of learning an instrument in order to enter the professional field. So I think the fact that I was privileged enough to have lessons as a kid and a musical family really set me on a great path for the music field. I've been playing violin since I was 3, and it's just something my parents made me do every day. I had to practice. It was the non-negotiable experience. But then when it came to the high school years, where those precious times where you're starting to think about what do you want to do after high school, when you gain that independence, I knew I wanted it to be music. I knew I wanted it to be music related. In my grade 12 year, I was sort of waffling between going into straight into a Bachelor of Music degree or going down the route of music therapy. I was looking at a lot of different programs because in my grade 12 year, this is gonna be long. This is like the real. Here's all the context. In my grade 12 year, I lived in a really small town called Outlook, Saskatchewan, and I volunteered once a week to go visit the nursing home in Outlook, and I would sit with the people there and play. Oftentimes, or often, we would just sit and chat, and it was really incredible every time. I had this incredibly potent experience every time I would bring my violin, just seeing the absolute joy of the residents whenever music was happening. And as a 16, 17-year-old, um, it was very informative and influential on me to see the power of music in like happening in the making in those moments. So it was really influential on me because I could see how much it meant to people to experience music on such a fundamental level. It's like people who had mobility issues and dementia and just all levels and ranges of that. And but regardless of their experience, whenever I would start playing something, if it was something they recognized or not, you could just see in their emotional experience how powerful that was. So to experience that in a multi-generational way as a high schooler, I knew that I wanted that to be at the center of what my career was as a musician. I was never interested in like a soloist career or things like that. I didn't want to be. I didn't want this idea of like a we have very few models of professional musicians, or at least I had very few models of what a professional musician looked like when I was growing up in rural Saskatchewan. Um, the only two the only two ideas I had was like, okay, well, I could be a teacher or I could sit in an orchestra. Those were the only two options that I saw um, in my life growing up. So when I went into music school, I didn't know what that would look like, but I knew that I didn't want to only do either of those things. And the only is essential to that because it's like I don't think I'd be happy if I just sat in an orchestra, and I don't think I'd be happy if I only if I only taught. Like there had to be a balance in my mind. Um, as a 17-year-old. Anyways, but I also just knew that I loved playing the violin and I wanted to get better at it. So those were my two motivations when I entered my bachelor's degree. So I didn't have an idea of what I wanted my career to be when I entered music school. I just knew I wanted to get better at playing. And then I was surrounded by wonderful, wonderful friends and colleagues and mentors in my bachelor degree who were really, really inspirational and influential on me. Um, and then in my last year, this is where the career stuff starts. In my last year of my music degree in Manitoba, I applied for a job at a nonprofit organization in the States. And it was one that I had heard of before because I received an article from a family friend about this nonprofit. It's called Community Music Works. So it was on my radar. And so all of my friends were applying for grad school, and I didn't want to go to grad school. I was like, I don't know if that's for me. So I, on a whim, applied for this 2-year fellowship position. It was an internship at this nonprofit called Community Music Works in Providence, Rhode Island. Um, and I didn't think I would get it. It was like, they're not going to hire this Canadian from the middle of the prairies. Like, there's, but they did. It was amazing. So I got the job, and that started me on a path. So that was a really informative 2 years because it was essentially a nonprofit management training program. So I worked under the direction of Sebastian Ruth, who's the founder and artistic director of Community Music Works, and Heath Marlowe, who was the executive director at the time, and a great faculty of musicians and philosophical thinkers. And it was really rooted in the idea of musicians being in residence in a neighborhood. And they provided free music education to kids in the west side and south end of Providence, Rhode Island, and also ran a concert series. And it was those 2 years where the spark for Strong Harbour Strings began. And I knew I wanted to do something with my career as a musician that created a difference in people's lives and in a community. So I wanted, yeah, that was it. I've never been the kind of person who's been looking for um, um, like the fame or glory that you see when you see violin soloists in front of an orchestra. Like that was never something that I was interested in. I just wanted to see the spark happen for other people and hopefully make a difference. So yeah, that's kind of what the inspiration behind my choices for becoming a musician.
Interesting. So what do you think was the biggest takeaway of your internship at Community Music Works?
Whew, biggest takeaway. Um, the biggest takeaway. Um, there are so many. the thing that my time at community, the thing I'm most grateful for my time at Community Music Works, um, was I am most appreciative. Let me think about how to phrase this for a second. Um, I'm most appreciative for the critical thinking that we did in that organization in how we teach and what we perform. And that those two takeaways have been essential to the past 10 years of my life in the choices that I've made as a classical musician and as a teacher, I would say. Um, and so community music works is steeped in this sort of this critical thought about pedagogy and music in communities and in education. Um, and so I would say, like, yes, all of the practice grant writing and all of the management and all of the organizational structure side of it was essential to me. But however, I'm so grateful for all of the thinking that I was part of. Um, Community Music Works does an incredible job of creating this culture of thinking and thinking together to be really um, like engaged in the impact that they're making on people and on community and on a larger scale because they're quite nationally renowned as an organization at this point. Um, and I would say that I have tried to emulate that in my work at Strong Harbour Strings, is to be really thoughtful about what we teach and what we perform and represent, because representation matters so much when you have a group of kids. And like, for example, growing up, I had no models for what it was like to be a professional violinist, except for the teacher that I took lessons from. So I think it's really critical to see yourself in the mentors that you have to some extent, and that's something that that's a really important takeaway. Yeah.
That's great. So how did you get from Rhode Island to St. John's, Newfoundland?
At the end of my 2 year fellowship, well, not the end, but at the beginning of the second year of my 2 year fellowship, I suppose, at that point, I felt that I needed grad school, actually. So at the end of my undergrad, I wasn't ready for grad school, but at the end of the fellowship, I could tell that there was more I needed to learn about playing. And also being a Canadian in the States, I think that there was partly this influence of if I go to school in Canada, then I'll be connected somehow back to the country that I'm from. So although I applied to a lot of schools in the States and almost went to school in the States, but so Newfoundland. Why Newfoundland? That's a great question. I'm a wild card in Newfoundland, which I'm so grateful for all the time. My friend Erin, who I was working with, sent me a link to Memorial University, being like, "You might be interested in this program." I was like, "Yeah, okay. Where's Newfoundland again? I don't remember." It's like I colored it purple in grade 4. Like it's just being from the prairies and having no family out east. I just had no concept of it. So I checked out Memorial University, and at the time they had this incredible quartet program called the Suncor Energy Fellowship. It was like basically it was amazing on paper. Like as when I was reading it on paper, when I was looking for grad schools, I was like, this is incredible. Playing a string quartet. At that time, I was already playing in a professional string quartet, and that was sort of the goal. I like knew I loved string quartets and would love to play that repertoire forever. So it's like string quartets, grad school, you get a degree, you play with the NSO, and you do community outreach. So it had all of these things for this incredible scholarship, and it's like that would be a really great opportunity. So let's let's put it on the list. I'll apply. Let's go audition. Let's meet the teacher. So when it came time for the audition, I flew to Newfoundland, and I met Nancy Don, who is the violin teacher at MUN. And she just changed my life in 45 minutes. So I knew by the end of my audition that I was like, I need to study with Nancy Don. And if they don't accept me, I'm moving here anyways. So so thank goodness I got accepted into the graduate program here. And I'm really thankful for that program because it connected me with so many community organizations in St. John's that it was very easy to establish a freelance career in this city because of that experience. I started playing with the NSO right away as a grad student. I won the chair as assistant principal second in my second year. And I work with many different organizations here in St. John's, and a lot of that is attributed to my connections and because of that graduate program. So yeah, and I liked it so much. I got off the plane, I was like, I really like it here. It reminded me of Providence, to be very honest. Like when I got to St. John's, I was like, and I love Providence so much. So when I got to St. John's, I was like, oh, this reminds me of Providence. So I instantly really loved the whole energy of the city. Yeah. So, and then when I graduated, I was like, yeah, let's make it go. Let's see what happens.
That's awesome. Okay, so finished graduate school at MUN
Hmm.
and then did some work with the NSO. And so from there, how did you get to where you are today?
Ah, yes. So after I finished graduate school at Memorial, how did I get here today? Right. So the beginnings of Strong Harbor Strings happened right away. Actually, I pitched to the youth orchestra that they had an outreach program at the time, and I pitched my idea of a I pitched my program idea to them, and they accepted it. So the first iterations were under the first iterations of Strong Harbor Strings were under the umbrella of the Newfoundland Symphony Youth Orchestra, now called Kalos Youth Orchestra. And I'm also very grateful for that organization for kind of believing in the dream and being willing to take me under their wing and try things out for the first couple of years. It was really a great partnership. So the first 2 years of Strong Harbor Strings, we were actually called the NSYO Suncor Energy Outreach Program, and we started with 7 kids um, in Buckmaster Circle Community Center, and then grew to 9, grew to 11. In those first 2 years, we grew up to 15, I believe. It was just me, and I had managed to secure the next class of Suncor Energy String Quartet Fellows, graduate students at MUN, to be teachers for the program. So there was this like mentorship, menteeship happening like between me and the grad students, but also us and the students. So there was like just multiple levels of mentorship happening, which was really, really cool. So then after 2 years under the youth orchestra umbrella, it just became clear that our missions were very different. So we with their blessing we parted organizations ways so that Strong Harbor Strings could grow under its own identity and be more of its own be more have more of its own identity, but still have a lot of community partnership with the orchestra. Like many of our students play in the youth orchestra and have a really fabulous experience in that organization. And we talk regularly about like pedagogy and education, and we participate in youth orchestra events as much as we can, and it's a really great community partnership. Yeah, so that I guess that was the beginning of Strong Harbor Strings, and now here we are 7 years later. So we're growing and changing all the time.
So what is Strong Harbor Strings? Like, what does it mean to you as an organization, and what does it mean for your students and families?
Yes, that's a big one. Strong Harbor Strings is a mentoring artist program, music education program, and so when you unpack that a little bit, it means that like at the heart of it is that mentorship between teachers and students. We model so many aspects of our lives as musicians to our students through performance, through education, through the conversations we have with families and students, and that's really integral to the culture of Strong Harbor Strings. So that idea of it being a mentoring artist program that uses music education and music performance to create transformative experiences for children and youth. So we have kids as young as 6 and as old as 16. Um, and we're still a very young program. We've been in existence for 7 years, 5 years as Strong Harbor Strings, 6 years as Strong Harbor Strings. Um, and we grow with our students. We have students who've been in it since day one when they were in second grade, and now they're going into grade 10.
Wow.
Wild to think about. So yeah, that's crazy. I hope those numbers add up. Anyways, yeah. I think we just finished our 7th season. Yes, okay. Good, Carole. So that's what Strong Harvest Strings is. We're essentially a music education program, but a community-based music education program that really strives to use music as the vehicle for transformative experiences and just to help aid these kids to become the best versions of themselves through music and other community experiences. So, and us too, me too. I'm constantly inspired by the Strong Harbour Strings students to become the best version of myself as well. So there's a lot of reciprocal learning happening at Strong Harbour Strings. Um, yeah, so that's what Strong Harbour Strings is. And what Strong Harbour Strings means to me, I think it's really, it's personal, of course, because I started it 7 years ago and have been thinking about this idea for, since the seeds were budding when I was 17 years old and saw how much of an impact music had on people and how powerful that was. And I knew that that's what I wanted to be able to share with people. So that has been just the center of my, that's been the center of my life as a musician and as a teacher and of Strong Harbour Strings. So stuff I think about all the time.
So, if someone had no idea what Strong Harbour Strings did, can you describe a regular day for a student at Strong Harbour Strings? What does that look like?
A regular day at Strong Harbour Strings. Well, I'll talk about a regular week. So students at Strong Harbour Strings have a combination of individual and group experiences. So they come twice a week for musical experiences. One time a week is for a half-hour lesson, one-on-one with a teacher, just like your standard music lessons. And then another time a week, they come for group experiences. So all of the students are divided into different orchestras. Although when I say orchestra, I use that term loosely because we only have about 30 kids in our program, and our groups are divided in our students are divided in groups of approximately like 4 to 8. And then we only teach strings. It's only violin, viola, and cello. So our students choose between violin, viola, or cello when they join. And then they're divided into orchestras based on level, partly age, partly level. And so on the group experience day, kids come and we have snacks. They can just like chill out a little bit after school. We are lucky to have Cornerstone Ministry Center as another community partner. They provide space for us to hold our classes. And of course, I'm thinking like pre-coronavirus lockdown. So of course everything has looked different since March, but pre-March, we have this beautiful space that we have access to where kids come after school, they have a snack, there are foosball tables, they run around, it's great. We let them like run off some steam after school, and then we start our group experiences all together. And we do a group activity, multi-age, multi-level, just sitting around in a circle and talking about our days and how we are and doing something that brings us together as a community. And that's been a really special thing that has developed over the past couple of years. And then after that, kids break off into different orchestras. And yeah, and our teachers, we have different teachers who teach different levels. Yeah, so a day in the week in the life of a Strong Harbour Strings students includes hanging out with buddies, playing foosball, eating snacks, being in an orchestra with a couple of their peers and learning something new, hanging out with a teacher that they hopefully admire or something, or is teaching them something, and then coming another day a week to have a one-on-one lesson in which that relationship with their teacher can inform what they're learning or like what kind of goals they set for themselves musically and personally. So yeah.
So, as the founder of the organization, what does a regular day look like for you?
Woo! A regular day for me. A regular day in the life of Carole, director of Strong Harbour Strings. I wear many hats in this organization. I teach, of course, and I perform and play. But on top of that, I'm also the chief administrator. And so a lot of things that happen behind the scenes include just making sure the organization is going to run, fundraising, community partnerships, managing paperwork, all sorts of things that come along with managing a nonprofit. But also, when I'm on site with the students and families and teachers, there's a lot of checking in with people. There's a lot of chatting with families. There's a lot just to see how people are. Um, there's a lot of helping kids remember to pick up their juice boxes and put them in the recycling bin. There's a lot of just that like chitter chatter kind of stuff that happens um, when you're managing an educational site. So it's busy stuff. I find that I'm often really tired because there's a lot of energy that's happening when you have like 20 to 30 kids in a building and 4 teachers, and you're trying to make sure everybody has everything they need, and but you're also trying to make sure that they have the responsibility to make sure they have everything they need. And so when it finally comes to my turn to get into the classroom with my students, you close the door and you leave the chatter of everyone else's classrooms behind, and it's just you and that group of students, and it's nice to be able to focus on that. So it's this beautiful line between um, like when you walk into Strong Harbour Strings on a group day, there's a lot happening, but it's really incredible to witness because the chatter that's happening means that people are talking to each other, and like there's community that's happening, and parents are chatting, and kids are chatting with multiple kids. One of the beautiful things at Strong Harbour Strings is like there are no age like the kids who are older hang out with the kids who are younger. There's a lot of welcoming despite age. So you'll see someone who's 16 playing foosball with someone who's 8, and that happens all the time. And everyone just it's a really loving environment, and I think that's really special. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. But you talk about your duties as sort of the main administrator, but Strong Harbor Strings is not only music education. Can you talk about the other sort of pillars of Strong Harbor Strings?
Yes, absolutely. The other, so Strong Harbor Strings has two pillars that make up the organization, and one is the music education aspect that I've been talking about, but the other is performance. So, yes, our students perform on a regular basis, but the teaching faculty also performs as an ensemble. We run a concert series throughout the year, generally September to June. Um, where the teaching artists are featured performers, excuse me. Um, yeah, so as a faculty, we plan concerts, and we base our concerts and our concert series on the same values of the program. So in terms of the values of Strong Harbor Strings, accessibility is the first one. We want to create equal access to music education for families who might not otherwise be able to afford it, because oftentimes music is prohibitively expensive. Um, Music lessons are prohibitively expensive, especially if you play a string instrument. Like violins alone can cost, like hundreds of dollars. So if someone falls in love with a violin but they can't do it, then that's what Strong Harbour Strings is for, is to take down barriers to music education, to after school music education. Um, yes, so in our concert series, accessibility is another main value. We want to create opportunities for people to hear classical music where they otherwise might not be able to hear it. So we often choose venues that are centralized, so they're easy to get to, or venues that are like non-traditional venues. So we play in pubs and bookstores and the places like that all the time. We were part of the City of St. John's summer concert series, and we played in the Rooms last year, and so places that are accessible and prices that are accessible. So we have a pay what you can. We have a yes. So concert, like the ticket prices are often either free or at a very very low pay what you can sort of ticket price in order to create accessibility for events. Yeah, and also in terms of repertoire choices, accessibility also comes into play because we want to choose repertoire. It's important to me that we choose repertoire that is diverse and that is exciting to us, right? Like I think we often, as musicians, we have to play things that, um, like you get hired for a gig and you have to play the music you're hired to play. But at the Strong Harbor Strings concert series, we have we have all of the autonomy to choose what we want to play. So it's exciting to choose pieces that you're like really thrilled about. And I spend a lot of time doing research on composers. Like we program women composers and people of color who write music all the time, just to create a diverse and wonderful recital program. And that's always been a value of the Strong Harbour Strings concert series since we started. So um, yeah, I think that's really those pillars. Those are the two pillars is that make up the concert series as well as the educational program.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit about the potential upcoming concert series? Are there any details you could release?
Sure. We're still in the planning phases for next year because we don't know what next year will quite look like. But we are definitely planning a concert series, and whether that will be live streamed, broadcast, or a combination of in-person events that are physically distanced and safe to attend. There will be events happening. And next year, given that we're back to the 20s, I wanted to feature music by composers of the 1920s. We're going to have a concert that kind of features ragtime music, music of Scott Joplin, and other wonderful people from the 20s. As well as we're going to, I mean, that's the one I'm kind of most excited about at this particular moment because I also just got a piece of music in the mail that I plan on using for this concert that I'm very excited about. So I'm going to start learning it immediately. Yeah, the Louisiana Strut by Coleridge Taylor Perkinson. It's a fabulous piece of music. Check it out. Anyways, so yeah, so stay tuned. There's going to be some really, really great events that we'll have planned for everybody.
Where can people find out about these events?
We have a website, strongharborstrings.com, and also are active on Facebook, and there is also an Instagram account. So I think it's just facebook.com/strongharborstrings. You can Google us, and all of that will pop up.
Okay. Well, let's bring it back a little bit to the education side. I'm wondering, what was your favorite moment at Strong Harbor Strings this past season?
Oh, there are so many. Um, okay, I have a couple. um, this was an interesting year, of course. It's 2020. Um, we had a very normal first half of the year between September and December. And then in January in St. John's, we were hit with this epic snowstorm that shut everything down. Then we had about a month of things being kind of normal. And then the global pandemic hit in March. And so everybody around the world, of course, us included, was scrambling to figure out how to adjust to new circumstances. And it took us a while to adjust to online teaching, and because of all the questions of accessibility, when you're forced to switch gears and deliver online content, it just begs so many questions about, well, how can we assume everybody has a device, and how can we assume everyone has access to a device, and how can we assume that everyone has access to the same time, and how do we change our programming depending on all of this so that all of our students can participate at a meaningful level still. And every family circumstance is so different. So it took us a while to figure out a system. Um, and but one of the most touching moments, I think, happened amidst all of that, where where a student was sending me an email or something just to let me know that they wouldn't be able to make it to a group class or to one of our group classes that we were offering online. And it was a really touching moment because in her text, it was a text, she sent me a text saying, I can't make it, but I really miss Strong Harbor Strings and I can't wait to be back. And just reading that really was like, I miss Strong Harbour Strings too. And it really meant a lot to hear from that student about how much it meant to them that we were like just in general the program, how much they looked forward to being with their peers and learning music and practicing together and yeah, it was really touching to have that feedback from that student. So yeah, and that's I think that one's coming to mind because it happened most recently. I have a hard time remembering September. So much has happened since then.
So, to bring it back to sort of a more solemn note, how did the transition to online classes go, and how would you imagine the organization moving forward in an online setting?
It took us a while. It took us a good 3 weeks to adjust. And I think a lot of organizations were in a similar situation where, because there was so little information at first, and everything shut down so fast, it's just one day we were at Cornerstone Ministries, our home base, running programming, and then it was then just everything was closed. So, and at first it was like, well, we don't know when we'll be back, maybe a couple weeks, woo. But then of course it became clear pretty quickly that this was going to be a bit of a longer term um, thing. So once we realized that this was the remainder of the school year, the teachers got planning. We got planning pretty quickly, and I think yeah, it took us 3 weeks or 4 weeks maybe to come up with content and a plan that worked. And the transition was tricky, to be quite honest. It was it took us a long time to realize that we had to come up with many different tiers for people to participate. And the way we communicated, the way I communicated with families to make sure that they had the information they needed and that the times worked for the lessons and et cetera, et cetera. It kind of amped up things behind the scenes for me in terms of communication. But it also was worth it because just we got a lot of feedback about how appreciative parents were that we still offered something, because I think a lot of people just it was done, right? Like a lot of after school activities were just over. So the fact that we were able to adjust and offer something at a lesser capacity, but at least it was something, was really appreciated. So it took us a while to find our groove, but we did. and and I'm hoping in September, the dream and the hope is that we return to some hybrid of in-person and online. Now we can do online. We spent a lot of time in March and April researching best practices and yeah, best practices and really familiarizing ourselves as educators in content and curriculum, and adjusted a lot of things that we did in order to be able to serve our students.
Yeah.
So now we're equipped, I think, if we have to do that again. But hopefully we
Wow.
don't.
Yeah. So nice to maintain that sense of continuity in this
Yeah,
way of living. So it's nice to have those connections with your students.
I agree.
You've mentioned your teachers as teaching artists. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what their role is in Strong Harbor Strings?
Yes. So we refer to our teachers as teaching artists because of the comprehensive nature that the comprehensive nature of the position, I'd say. It's like usually when you get hired to do something, you get hired to teach or you get hired to play. It's like the roles are very separate. But in Strong Harbor Strings, they are very connected. So the teaching artistry has two different levels to it. That's one of the levels, is the fact that as a teacher at Strong Harbor Strings, you have a very multifaceted um, job description. You're involved in curriculum development and you're constantly planning all the time, depending on, you're constantly like part of planning discussions. We planning all the time. No. But and you teach and you perform, and so it's a very comprehensive position. And the other level of it that I really appreciate is just the idea that teaching, you can be an artist of teaching. Like when we think of the word artist, that often you think of like people who create things, right? It's like I'm an
Mm.
artist. I'm a visual artist. I'm an artist. I play music. Blah blah blah. But you can be a teaching artist in the way that you approach your craft as a teacher, and I I really love that description. Um, right, because it just means we're constantly diving deep into how we teach and what we teach, in order to create a really thoughtful experience pedagogically for our students. Um, yeah. So, and that term, I didn't come up with that term. That term has been in existence for a long time. I learned it from Eric Booth, who literally wrote the book about teaching artistry. It's called
Mm.
The Teaching Artist Bible by Eric Booth. It's really great. You can find a copy. Check it out. Good.
Look that up.
Mhm.
Earlier, you mentioned for yourself when you were going along your journey the importance of balance in teaching and performing. How do you feel the Strong Harbor Strings has accomplished that balance?
That's a great question. I think the fact that it's built into the organizational structure really helps to create the balance. Um, and yes, okay, so we create the balance between teaching and performing through the organizational structure. So when we're planning a whole season, um, we plan performance events hand in hand with the educational year. Um, the teachers are constantly performing for the students. We do educational workshops every 6 weeks or 2 months or so. So the kids are learning something new all the time. And the educational workshops are, we use those as an opportunity to introduce our students to something new. Kind of, I mentioned that, but realized I wanted to explain it more. So we're constantly bringing in artists who just do something a little differently, right? So it's not ever the same genre of music, and it's never the same ensemble. I mean, the Strong Harbor Strings Collective, we play for the students regularly, but we're always playing different stuff.
Mhm.
So like we played Bartok for them once, and that was a highlight of a year for a lot of people. They're like, that Bartok workshop was so cool. It's like you wouldn't expect an 8-year-old to like get a Bartok string quartet. That's not like something that regularly happens, but they were really into it. And we brought Brian Cherwick in one year, and he brought 40 different traditional Ukrainian instruments, and the kids got to play them. They learned all about it. Ouroboros came once and did like jazz saxophone quartet stuff and like Balkan inspired music and original compositions. And again, another interesting opportunity for them to meet a composer, like someone who's like written music and then now is playing it for these students, right? Like that is like, oh wow, an option that I have. We had Romesh, one of our teaching artists, who brought in guitars and loop pedals and did a workshop on that, like the electronics stuff that you can incorporate into your playing. So we're constantly trying to incorporate different styles and genres of music and different examples of musicians, I
Mhm.
think, which is really important for everyone to see, because we only teach violin, viola, cello. Um, like it's quite limited in scope and what instruments our students can choose to play. However, I think it can be really, you never know what's going to inspire a kid. So for them to be learning the viola, for them to see a blues musician and be like, oh hey, I like that. Can I do that too? I think like those creating moments for that kind of spark
Mhm.
is what Strong Harbor Strings is all about. It's just creating moments for sparking to happen.
What are some other ways that students maybe get to discuss broader topics and sort of gain a sense of community with their peers at Strong Harbor Strings?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
There's maybe some activities the older kids do to engage with broader topics in the community and with their peers.
The older students I think they have a unique experience at Strong Harbor Strings. We've created a new class called the Conversation Crew. Um, and this is also something that's directly inspired and influenced by Community Music Works. They have a
Mm.
teen group as well that they call Phase 2. And
Mm.
so when kids turn 12 at CMW, they audition for something called Phase Two, and it's on Friday nights. All the teens come and they play together. They play chamber music. Then they eat dinner, and then they have like this group discussion about social issues or things that are important to them. And it's a really powerful experience. It's really, and as like a teacher and an adult, it's really incredibly powerful to see a group of young people like talk about the things that they value in ways that like it's really incredible. So I knew that that was going to be an important key to Strong Harbor Strings, to be able to create that space for our teens as well. um, However, it's only just recently that we've had teens in the program. So our conversation crew is only 2 or 3 years old. um, and now and we it's for us, it's only a conversation based experience. We just, if you're 12, you're in conversation crew. If you're 12 or older, you just join conversation crew, and it's an extra half an hour at the end of our group class days. They just talk. They talk about community. They talk. We have a teacher who facilitates the discussion. They talk about things that are important. They talk about different like community issues or societal issues, and they talk and how to approach things. So I think we talk about mental health a lot. We talk about diversity and representation. We talk about how to deal with bullying. Like we talk about all kinds of things that like maybe they're talking about at school as well, but maybe they're not. So and just um, with the hope that they have a safe space and to like connect with each other, and that we can maybe provide them with tools that might be helpful in their life, and learn from them as well. Again, I'm constantly inspired by these kids and the ideas that they have. So yeah, so our teens, they can also sign up as mentors as well. Like a lot of our teens, oh, sign up isn't the right word. A lot of them just stick around, which is neat. They'll come for their lesson. Oftentimes our teens have their lessons first in the day because our middle schools in St. John's, they have a really early, they get released from school really early. So a lot of the times our middle schoolers have their lessons first in the afternoon after school, and then a lot of times they'll just stick around. So what I try to do is I try to connect our older students with our younger students in a mentorship capacity. So our middle schoolers and anyone who's kind of has their lesson on the same day, I'll be like, okay, well, you're in grade 8 and you're in grade 3, so like, why don't you, 8th grader, why don't you help this 3rd grader with like their music before their lesson? So there's like a lot of informal mentorship happening on the lesson days. And I think that's also really powerful too. And a lot of our middle schoolers really love that experience. Actually, they take that role really seriously. Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like at Strong Harbor Strings, there is music lessons, there is personal development, social development, new experiences, new relationships. What are the biggest takeaways you want your students to gain from Strong Harbor Strings?
Oh, I think that's it. I think a sense of self, and a sense of the importance of community, and a sense of how important it is to give back, um, and a joy and a love for sharing music. I think all those things.
Wow. What are some of the things you spoke about community there? So, what are some of the things that Strong Harbor Strings adds to the St. John's community at large beyond the Buckmaster Circle and Shia Heights sort of areas?
That's a good question. um, yeah, so a lot of students and families come through our doors. Like we currently have approximately 30 students between the two centers, one in Buckmaster Circle and one in Shea Heights. And we're putting concerts on in both of those locations on a regular basis. So people from the communities are seeing us all the time. And we're also putting on concerts in all sorts of other downtown locations. So people are seeing us all the time, in the Black Sheep or in the Anglican Cathedral. It's like lots of different places. I hope that the impact that Strong Harbour Strings is having on the community is, I hope that we're seen as a thoughtful organization, one that's providing music for families and kids and people in general in a thoughtful way. Um, the feedback that I get from people, it's interesting being in the role that I am because often you're so um, engrossed in what's happening right now or what's happening tomorrow that you don't get a chance to step back and look on a broader scale of what the impact is. But the feedback that I've gotten from people, from parents and community members in general, is one that is often that of keep going, you're doing a great job, like that kind of stuff. But also some of the parents have said the most incredible things about how like it has been a really influential, like their child's involvement with the program has been really influential. um, there's been cases of kids who are really like debilitatingly shy, opening up to people that they never would otherwise, just in terms of like being of comfort level with teachers and students. And yeah, and it's amazing to see the kids transform after they've been in the program for a couple of years, and how they interact with their peers and teachers and even other parents who are around too. It's like it's a big old family a lot of the time. Yeah. So that's yeah, that's all there. I think.
So if someone from the community outside of Strong Harbor Strings wanted to be a part of it, are there ways that they can volunteer or become more involved in the organization?
Absolutely. Contact me through the Strong Harbour Strings website. We're looking for volunteers all the time. We would love to recruit a few more board members if that's something that people are interested in serving in that capacity. And there are committees that we've got lots of committee volunteer opportunities, and event volunteer opportunities. You can sign up to be a mentor if you'd like to our students, practice buddies, because our older students are practice buddies with our younger students, but we've never had people who are practice buddies with our older students before, and how cool would that be? So and if there's a skill set that someone has that they would love to offer, then my goodness, we're always looking for ways to partner with people in the community. So reach out, let us know.
Awesome. That's great. So, what is your goal for the next season of Strong Harbor Strings?
For next year, for 2020, 2021, I think the main goal is just to reconnect and recalibrate after this very, very insane year that everyone has had. So my hope is that we can just be together somehow and find a way to stabilize, and reorganize after this lockdown period that we've been in. So our plan is to just forge ahead with a season as is, and adjust based on the recommendations from the chief medical office. Of course, we want to respect and adhere to all of the social policies that are in place, but still somehow find ways to make music together that are appropriate for social distancing, et cetera, and following all of the protocols that are in place. So that, honestly, if we can do that next year, then I am happy. So that's the main goal. But I think long term, it would be beautiful to, we talk about like expanding a little bit, maybe another center someday, or just more students in our current centers. It's always the question of going deeper into a community and like creating more impact there, or finding other communities to be part of. So we don't have a plan in place per se for the longer term future, but those are things we look forward to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Carole.
Thank you.